My slang is editorial, explicit material, briefcase show, live and stereo flow, feel me.
I made an earlier video asking, not at all facetiously, not at all insincerely, not joking around, what is the point of democracy? And in this video, we are asking with equal sincerity, what is the point of immigration? Not because I'm throwing up my hands and behaving as if there is no point whatsoever, but because so many people presuppose that having open doors for infinite immigration and incredibly generous refugee policy is an unquestioned and unquestionable good in and of itself without ever establishing what is it good for. In politics, in ethics, and in philosophy, some things are genuinely, authentically difficult to understand. And it's important that we have the patience and compassion necessary when examining those issues, discussing them, debating them with our fellow human creatures. Some things are not complex, are not difficult to understand at all, but they're unfamiliar. In this video, we're dealing with a question that is both unfamiliar and excites a lot of short-term emotional reactions that people have difficulty overcoming. Most people have adopted one extreme position or another on this issue without ever taking an interest in the facts, the consequences, or even what the options are. They feel that their own sense of moral superiority is invested in one position or another on this political issue. You might say their sense of self-esteem and self-worth is already attached to a commitment to a particular solution before they have even examined the problem. This is a map of Southeast Asia. You could say that Southeast Asia has 600 million people. Could be more, could be less, depending on where you set the boundaries. Hundreds and hundreds of millions. Everyone needs healthcare. When you look at this map, do you think each of these countries has hospitals and surgeons and medical doctors of equal quality? If you were doing humanitarian work in Cambodia or Laos, and you suddenly needed really serious medical attention, and you were looking at this map yourself, I don't know how much or how little money you've got or what your health insurance is willing to cover, you might start to question, where would you like to go to receive healthcare? All right. Healthcare tourism is a real factor in the Western world, in the Eastern world, in the Northern world, and in the Southern world. Okay. Healthcare tourism, dental tourism, people going on vacation to get their dental work done, and healthcare migration is a real factor. Healthcare refugees are a real factor. Now, I'm not going to ask in any depth or complexity which one of these countries has the best healthcare and which one has the worst. But you might be from Myanmar or Cambodia or Indonesia, and you might want to migrate to Japan in order to have access to better quality healthcare if you could. You might want to migrate to Singapore to have access to better quality healthcare if you should. Are we going to begin this discussion with the deep-seated assumption that this is a moral right, that this is an entitlement, that anyone who opposes the free movement of healthcare refugees, of healthcare migrants, is someone who's opposed to human rights, the progress of civilization, someone who doesn't care if the poor struggle and die and suffer? Let's take a full life cycle, centuries-long perspective on this. There is no technology that exists in Japan that is unavailable in Myanmar, Cambodia, or Indonesia. The vast majority of the technology that matters to provide healthcare was transmitted and published in textbooks at least 20 years ago, much of it 50 years ago. right? There is no secret for what to do with a broken arm. There's no secret for what to do with delivering a baby when a woman is in labor and going to give birth. Nevertheless, if you found yourself with a broken arm or 9 months pregnant in Cambodia, you might start becoming very alarmed indeed. You might become very much afraid that you're in a place where it's not safe to go to a doctor or hospital, have your broken arm looked after, or not safe to give birth there, and you might start looking at your options, right? Many of these things, technologically, we're not talking about assembling fighter jets, right? It's possible. My own country, Canada, is probably never going to be a center of aeronautics, of making fighter jets, right? Some technologies are really advanced and really unequal. This is not like cell phones. This is not like circuit boards. Canada is probably never going to do any of those things. But Canada can have decent healthcare. The nature of that technology can be shared and can be implemented everywhere by everyone in any language. I think already 20 years ago, the textbooks for all of these languages, even Cambodian, even Laotian, the information was there, right? The solution to the problem of healthcare in Southeast Asia cannot possibly be healthcare refugees or healthcare tourism, okay? The solution must be that each and every one of these countries, and within those countries, each and every one of these cities develops the capacity to deliver high-quality healthcare to their own people in their own language, period. It's not a solution for anyone to insist that it's your human right to run away and get surgery in Japan or run away and give birth and deliver a baby in Singapore just because it's more convenient for you right now, right? We need to have a commitment as individuals, as members of a society, as a country, and as a planet to build up the capacity to deliver healthcare locally, everywhere. Democracy, it's very much the same thing. Democracy is a technology that fundamentally hasn't changed in 2,000 years. Okay? Everything you need to know to run a democracy, it already exists in Myanmar, it already exists in Indonesia. It's a problem of implementation. People need democracy. They need freedom of speech in much the same way that they need healthcare. But the question is, why would you say it's a morally good thing to encourage people to run away to Japan, run away to Singapore, instead of building the capacity for democracy, building the institutions of democracy, building the reality of democracy in your own country? One country at a time, one city at a time, everywhere, locally, in your own language. We need democracy. We don't need to evacuate people so they can have democracy elsewhere. I made an earlier video asking, not at all facetiously, not at all insincerely, not joking around, what is the point of democracy? And in this video, we are asking with equal sincerity, what is the point of immigration? Not because I'm throwing up my hands and behaving as if there is no point whatsoever, but because so many people presuppose that having open doors for infinite immigration and incredibly generous refugee policy is an unquestioned and unquestionable good in and of itself without ever establishing what is it good for. I have a letter here from a supporter on Patreon. He opens by saying, Mr. Mazard, I didn't really want to reply to any particular argument in your post, but to the general spirit of it. I wanted to point out that anti-migration is likely an ethical issue of significance, but most take a right to restrict any kind of migration for any reason for granted. Free migration may be considered in a similar way to veganism, he means just as an abstract ethical argument. Quote, the question of immigration is surely underemphasized in contemporary philosophy, given its human importance. Literally millions of lives are affected in a serious and long-term manner by immigration restrictions. Were these restrictions lifted, millions of people would see greatly expanded opportunities and would take the chance to drastically alter their lives for the better. This makes immigration law a strong candidate for the most harmful body of law in America today. So he says, as a footnote, English is not his first language, and it's a little bit difficult. And thus also I have kind of corrected the grammar and changed the wording a little bit in reading this out loud, as you may have noticed on screen. Okay. The question I posed in my earlier video, and I was slightly miffed that this writer on Patreon just completely disregarded it. The question I posed was, if you have 20 million people leaving Myanmar to go and live in Thailand, and maybe you have another 2 million from Laos, and maybe 5 million from Cambodia, I don't know, 10, 20, 50 million from Indonesia, right? If you have tens of millions of people relocating to Thailand from all of these other countries that have a lower quality of government, a lower quality of democracy, and they're moving to Thailand because they can have a higher quality of life, yes, but because they can have democracy, freedom of speech, etc., okay? In what sense is that good? Who is that good for? Now, in my first video, I think I gave a perfectly eloquent voice to the fact that this will not be good for the countries that are being abandoned. It will not be good for the countries they are fleeing from. All right? If 20 million people who want democracy get up and leave Myanmar, there's an opportunity cost here. And there's something really wonderful and really positive that can be accomplished in Myanmar right now by 20 million people who are willing to stay and fight and die for a better democratic future in Myanmar. I can say the same thing about healthcare. Right now, short term, let's say there are 20 million people in Myanmar who have various health conditions, high blood pressure, heart attack, they're going to give birth to a baby, they got a broken arm. Let's say there are 20 million people in Myanmar who would really benefit from just relocating to Thailand. If we just grant them Thai citizenship, they have access to Thailand's healthcare system instead of Myanmar's healthcare system. Oh, well, that seems like a great boon for humanity if you are just looking at a single stage of analysis, right? But without even getting into how bad this is for Thailand, I was making the argument it's bad for Myanmar. It's bad for the countries that are being abandoned. If all of the homosexuals who are quite genuinely oppressed in Muslim majority countries apply for refugee status in Canada, who is going to fight for gay rights in those Muslim majority countries? If all of the atheists abandon all of the Muslim majority countries around the world, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, or whatever, which is happening. You can look them up on YouTube. You can watch YouTube videos from atheists who applied for refugee status because they feel, I believe correctly, that they are being persecuted, whether it is in Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, whatever the Muslim majority country is. Okay? If all of the atheists and all of the homosexuals and all of the dissident intellectuals, if they all apply for and receive refugee status in Canada, what is the future of Saudi Arabia going to be? What is the future of Pakistan going to be? Right? Who's going to fight for it? You? Me? No. I'm not. I've lived in Cambodia. I did humanitarian work in Cambodia. I'm not fighting. Like, as much interest as I might have as an armchair intellectual in Cambodia and in Myanmar right now, right? How much more than a Google search am I really willing to do for the future of Myanmar? And any of you sitting on the couch can ask yourselves that same question. Right? And this is where it gets even more interesting, is if we flip it around and start asking about Thailand, or we start asking about Canada, if we start asking about the destination countries. Because as little as I care about the future of Cambodia, as little as I care about the future of Myanmar, which is very likely to be more than any of you in the audience care, no offense, I've been there, I've done humanitarian work, I did years of research, I've read very large, heavy history books about these countries. I care, right? I care, but it's a certain kind of detached, distant, scholarly, academic care I've got, right? I'm not volunteering to fight in Myanmar's civil war. Are you? When those people leave Myanmar and they come to Canada, or when those people leave Myanmar and they come to Thailand, they will care much less about building a positive future in Canada or in Thailand than they did about their own country, right? They won't have that kind of commitment, that kind of passion. This is one of the most tragic things about all immigration, including refugee policy, right? Is that the level of civic engagement, the level of democratic and political commitment to building a better and brighter future in your destination country, it's much, much less than it was in your host country. I have fans of this channel of all ages, right? Some of you are teenagers. Some of you are in your 40s, 50s, and 60s. Right now, if you were offered an Israeli passport and a new life in Israel, would you continue to speak English as your first language? Would you continue to watch the news and talk about politics in English? Would you continue to care about politics in the United States, Western Europe, and just be someone who happens to live in Israel? Or would you really commit yourself to becoming completely fluent in Hebrew, settling down permanently, making that your newspaper, making that your set of humanitarian and political concerns? If that's too hard to imagine, we can replace Israel with Italy or Greece. Have you looked at learning modern Greek? Huge sacrifice. Would you just retire to Greece as an English-speaking outsider, continue reading the newspaper in English, right? Or would you get seriously committed to? Would you actually join a political party in Greece? Would you become an activist deeply concerned with what's currently unfolding in the future of Greece? Ask yourself that honestly. I say this as someone who has, within just the last couple of years, had on my desk stacked up Introduction to the Hebrew Language, Hebrew Dictionary, Introduction to Modern Greek, the Greek language. Among the languages I've studied just in the last couple of years and the places I've considered living, it's not just Thailand. It's not just Laos and Cambodia, all right? Greece and Israel in very different ways and different reasons. Those were options for me I had to think about. But I would probably have as little engagement as the vast majority of Pakistani immigrants to Canada, of Chinese immigrants to Canada. I've met and spoken to huge numbers of Chinese people in Canada. In Toronto, in Saskatchewan, here in BC, all right? They all still care about politics in China. The people who came here from Taiwan, they still care about politics in Taiwan. They still read the newspaper from Taiwan. They don't care about politics in Canada. They're not fighting for a better future in Canada, right? And if you had this kind of mass migration phenomenon in Asia, right, it wouldn't be good for Thailand. It wouldn't be good for many of the donor countries, the countries people are escaping from, shall we say. Okay? What is immigration good for? If you want to have better health care, you have to build the institutions for high quality health care, not here, not there, but everywhere we can do it. Okay? If you want to have a brighter future in terms of human rights and democracy, you do not want to encourage a cultural and political situation in which people just shop around to relocate to the country that will give them the highest quality of life and the highest quality of government at the lowest tax rate. We need to build the fundamental requirements for democracy here, there, and everywhere. Myanmar, the Civil War, is a great example. It's unfolding right now. Whatever you think the solution to the problem in Myanmar might be, whatever you think the solution to the problem in Syria or Afghanistan might be, it cannot possibly be exporting the percentage of their population that is dissatisfied with the status quo. We have to harness the powerful positive motivation of that dissatisfied minority to transform the future of each one of those countries.
Maybe we can practice doing financial together.
Yes, that's all I needed. I need it all.